You're not going to believe how this story ends. She thought she was just helping a lost tourist on a rainy afternoon in Rome. But weeks later, the same man tried to buy her business and her trust. What started as a simple act of kindness turned into a game of betrayal, lies, and one final move she never saw coming. Before we dive into this story, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Because trust me, you'll want to hear every detail of how a woman with nothing walked away with everything. The streets of Rome were crowded that afternoon. Lucia walked fast, her leather bag swinging on her shoulder. Then she saw him, a man in jeans and a plain white shirt arguing with a police officer near Piazza Navona. The officer pointed at his wallet and said in a loud voice, "Passport now." The man frowned. I don't understand. I didn't do anything." Lucia stopped walking. She knew that face, not his, but the officer's. Fake cop. She'd seen him pull this scam before. She stepped closer. "Is there a problem here?" Lucia asked, her voice firm. The officer turned. "This is official business, signorina." Lucia smiled. "You know what? I've seen your face on the wall at a police station. You must be famous there." The fake officer froze. The tourist looked between them, confused. Lucia leaned in. "Unless you want real police here in 2 minutes." The man in uniform scowled and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The tourist stared at Lucia. "Wait, was that real?" Lucia smiled. "Welcome to Rome." The man ran a hand through his dark hair. "Wow, thank you. I really thought I was in trouble." "You almost were," Lucia said. "They target tourists like you." He looked down. "Figures. First day here, and I almost get robbed." Lucia chuckled. "First day, huh?" He nodded. "I'm Mark." "Lucia." They shook hands. Mark smiled. "You saved me. Can I buy you a coffee or something?" Lucia thought for a second. Usually she said no to things like this, but something about him felt honest. "Sure, coffee sounds good." An hour later, they sat at a tiny cafe near the fountain. Mark leaned forward. "So you're like what, a local hero?" Lucia laughed. "Just a tour guide with sharp eyes." "You're a guide?" "Yeah, I take people around Rome, tell them stories, show them the real city." Mark nodded, smiling. "That's cool. I guess I'm lucky I met you." "You are," Lucia smiled back. "So what brings you here?" He shrugged, needed a break, wanted to get away. "From what?" He hesitated. "Work, life, stuff." Lucia noticed the way his eyes dropped when he said that, but she didn't push. "Well, Rome's good for escaping," she said. They smiled at each other. They spent the afternoon walking through the streets. Lucia showed him small alleys, secret churches, her favorite gelato place. Mark asked questions about the city, about her life, about everything. And Lucia found herself talking about her agency, about how hard it was to keep a business running, about how tourists sometimes didn't want real stories. They just wanted Instagram pictures. Mark listened, really listened. And when they stopped at the Spanish Steps, he turned to her. "You're different," she laughed. "Is that good or bad?" "It's good." For a second, they stood there in the middle of the crowd, just watching each other. As the sun went down, Mark checked his phone. "I should go," he said. "My hotel's across town." Lucia nodded. "Sure." He hesitated. "But I'd like to see you again, if that's okay." Lucia felt something twist in her chest. She barely knew him, but okay. Mark smiled. "I'll find you." Lucia shook her head, smiling. "Or you could just call." He laughed. "Right, that works too." That night,
Lucia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't know why, but for the first time in months, she felt alive and a little bit afraid of it.
The next morning, Lucia opened her agency. She turned the sign to open, switched on the lights, and started setting up brochures. "Excuse me." She turned around. Mark stood at the door, holding 2 cups of coffee. Lucia blinked. "You again?" He smiled. "You said I could call, but I thought showing up with coffee was better." Lucia laughed softly. "You're lucky I'm a morning person." "I'm lucky," Mark said, stepping inside, "because you saved me yesterday, and now I'm hooked on your tours." Lucia crossed her arms, amused. "Hooked? You only took one." He walked closer and offered her a cup. "Then, give me another. Today." Lucia tilted her head. "I'm working." "I'll pay." Lucia smiled. "You'll pay?" Mark nodded. "Full price, plus tip." Lucia looked at the clock. Her next group wasn't for another hour. "Fine," she said, grabbing the coffee. 1 hour. Private tour. Mark grinned. Best deal in Rome. They walked through Trastevere that morning. Mark asked questions about the city, about hidden places, about her favorite spots. Lucia answered. They talked. They laughed. At one point, Mark stopped walking. "Lucia, can I ask you something?" She glanced at him. "Sure. Why do you do this?" "This. Guiding. Telling stories. It's hard work, isn't it?" Lucia thought for a moment. "It's real. It's honest. I meet people. I see the world without leaving my city." Mark nodded slowly. "I like that." She smiled. "And what about you? What do you do, really?" Mark shrugged. "Business. I invest in things. Boring stuff." Lucia raised an eyebrow. "You don't look like a boring guy." Mark smirked. "You don't look like a girl who saves strangers." Lucia chuckled. "Touché." At the end of the tour, they stood by a quiet fountain. Mark put his hands in his pockets. "So, can I see you again, not as a tourist?" Lucia crossed her arms. "As a friend?" He smiled. "Or whatever you want." Lucia stared at him. "Mark, I don't know who you really are, and I don't mix work and—" He cut her off. "I'm no one special, just a guy who got lucky yesterday." Lucia bit her lip, and for a second, she believed him. "Fine," she said softly. "Friends." The next days became a blur. Mark showed up at the agency almost every morning, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with flowers, and sometimes with nothing but a smile. They walked, talked, laughed. He asked about her favorite childhood memories. She asked about his favorite places in the world. And little by little, Lucia started letting her walls down. One night, they sat by the Tiber River. Mark looked at the water and whispered, "Sometimes I wish I could just disappear." Lucia frowned. "Why would you say that?" Mark shook his head. "Forget it. I'm just tired of people who only want things from me." Lucia placed her hand on his arm. "Not everyone's like that." Mark turned to her, eyes soft. "You're not like that." They stared at each other. Mark leaned in. Lucia felt her heart race, but before their lips touched, she pulled back. "Mark!" He nodded, giving her space. "Friends." Lucia smiled gently. "Friends." But that night, lying in bed, she wondered why her heart didn't believe her own words. It was a slow morning at the agency. Lucia sat at her desk, staring at the bills on the table. She whispered, "This is bad. Rent, taxes, suppliers, all overdue." "Rough day?" Lucia jumped. Mark stood by the door with a small paper bag. Lucia sighed. "Do you always sneak in like that?" Mark grinned. "Only when I bring pastries." He placed the bag on her desk. Lucia smiled, shaking her head. "You're impossible." Mark sat across from her. "I like seeing you smile." Lucia opened the bag. Warm croissants. She took a bite. Fine, you're forgiven." Mark leaned forward. "You know, you could talk to me if you need help." Lucia looked up. "Help? I mean, I'm good with numbers, investments. Maybe I could help with this." He pointed at the bills. Lucia froze. For a second, she felt exposed. She set the croissant down. "Mark, this is my business. I handle it." Mark raised his hands. "Of course, I didn't mean to. It's fine." Lucia cut him off. "Really?" An awkward silence filled the room. Then Mark stood. "I'll let you work." Lucia watched him leave. Why did his offer feel more like a test? Later that afternoon, Lucia walked with her assistant, Carla. Carla teased. "So, the American again?" Lucia smiled softly. "Yeah, he likes you." Lucia shrugged. "Maybe." Carla raised an eyebrow. "Do you like him?" Lucia stopped walking. Did she? She shook her head. "I don't know. He's nice, but something feels off," Carla asked. Lucia nodded slowly. "Yeah." That evening, Mark waited outside the agency. "Dinner?" he asked. Lucia smiled weakly. "I'm tired." Mark searched her eyes. "Are you okay?" Lucia forced a laugh. "Of course." Mark hesitated. "Can I walk you home?" Lucia shook her head. "Not tonight." Mark nodded, his smile fading. "All right, maybe tomorrow." Lucia watched him walk away. Why did she feel guilty? The next morning, Lucia arrived early. She stepped inside and froze. Mark was in her office, on the phone. "The money transfer has to be discreet, no names," Mark said. Lucia stood at the door, heart racing. Mark continued, "Yes, through the agency account. I'll handle it." Lucia gasped softly. Mark turned. "Lucia, it's not what it sounds like." Lucia crossed her arms. "Really?" Mark hung up, walking toward her. "I swear it's nothing illegal. It's complicated." Lucia narrowed her eyes. "You're using my agency?" "No, I was going to talk to you about it." "You should leave," Lucia said, her voice cold. Mark opened his mouth but said nothing. He grabbed his jacket and walked out. That night, Lucia sat with Carla. "I caught him on the phone," Lucia said, "talking about money, using my agency." Carla frowned. "Did he explain?" Lucia shook her head. "He said it's complicated." Carla sighed. "Maybe it is, but Lucia, maybe you should find out the truth before cutting him off." Lucia stared at her friend. Could she really trust him? Or was Mark just another man using her? The next day, Mark didn't show up, or the day after, or the next. One morning, Lucia opened her agency and found an envelope on the floor. Inside, a note. "I'm sorry for everything. From M." No explanations, no words, just that. Lucia stared at it for a long time and felt empty.
Days passed. No sign of Mark. Lucia tried to focus on work. She gave tours, she smiled at customers, but every time she heard the doorbell ring, she hoped it was him. It never was. One afternoon, Carla came into the office. "You're quiet," Carla said. Lucia shrugged. "Just tired." Carla sat down. "It's been a week. Maybe you should call him." Lucia shook her head. "No, he made his choice." Carla gave her a soft look.
And you're okay with that?
Lucia didn't answer. That evening, Lucia closed the agency alone. As she turned off the lights, she noticed an envelope under the door. Another one. She picked it up. Inside, a bank letter. Her eyes widened. The agency loan was paid. All of it. Lucia whispered, "What?" Attached was a small note. "No one owns you, not even me. M." Her heart pounded. The next morning, Lucia stormed into the bank. "I need to know who paid my loan," she said to the manager. The man shook his head. It was a private transaction, anonymous. Lucia leaned over the desk. "I'm the account holder. Tell me." The manager sighed. "All I can say, it came from a company based in New York, DeSanti Enterprises." Lucia stepped back, stunned. That night, Lucia sat with Carla at their favorite cafe. "He paid my debts," Lucia whispered. Carla's eyes widened. "And you didn't know?" Lucia shook her head. "I thought he was using me, but he saved me." Carla leaned in. "Why would he leave then?" Lucia stared at her cup. Maybe he thought I'd never forgive him." Carla took her hand. "Then find him before it's too late." The next morning, Lucia woke up early. She searched every hotel in Rome. No one had seen Mark DeSanti. 3 days later, Carla ran into the office breathless. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. Lucia grabbed it. A news article. DeSanti family scandal. Heir disappears amid business war. Lucia read the headline twice. Mark had vanished. That night, Lucia sat on the Spanish steps. She whispered, "Where are you, Mark?" Behind her, a voice answered softly, "Right here." Lucia turned, and there he was, standing in the shadows. She stood up fast. "Mark," he gave her a sad smile. "Hi." She walked toward him. "Where have you been?" "Hiding." "From who?" Mark sighed. "My brother." Lucia's eyes narrowed. "Matteo?" Mark nodded. "He's after me. After us." Lucia folded her arms. "Us?" Mark stepped closer. "He thinks you're helping me. And maybe you are." Lucia shook her head. "I don't know who I'm helping anymore." Mark looked down. "I never wanted to drag you into this." Lucia whispered. "Then why pay my debts?" Mark looked into her eyes. "Because I care. And because I knew you'd never let me help you any other way." Lucia's heart twisted. They stood there in silence. Finally, Mark said, "I'm leaving Rome." Lucia whispered, "For good?" Mark nodded. "Unless you want me to stay." Lucia swallowed hard. Part of her wanted to scream yes, but another part, she whispered, "I don't know." Mark smiled sadly. "I understand." He leaned in, kissed her cheek, soft, slow, then turned to walk away. Lucia stood frozen, watching him disappear into the night.
The next morning, Lucia walked into her agency and found a man sitting at her desk. He wore a dark suit, gold cufflinks, and a cold smile. "Good morning, Miss Lucia," the man said. Lucia froze. "Who are you?" The man stood. "Matteo DeSanti." Lucia's heart stopped. He offered his hand. She didn't take it. Matteo chuckled. "Straight to business. I admire that." Lucia crossed her arms. "What do you want?" Matteo stepped closer. "My brother's been foolish. He likes you. That makes you valuable." Lucia narrowed her eyes. "I'm not part of your family drama." Matteo tilted his head. "Aren't you?" Lucia glared at him. "What are you trying to say?" Matteo smiled. "I'm offering you a deal." Lucia stayed silent. Matteo continued. "You give me Mark, I give you freedom, money, safety." Lucia laughed once.
You want me to betray him? Matteo smirked. Call it a business arrangement. Lucia shook her head. Get out. Matteo leaned in. Be smart, Lucia. People who stand by Mark don't last long. Lucia whispered. Neither do bullies. Matteo stared at her, then smiled. We'll see. He turned and walked out. That night, Lucia sat with Carla. Carla said, You should leave Rome. Lucia shook her head. I'm not running. Carla leaned closer. This is dangerous, Lucia whispered. I know. Carla sighed. Are you doing this for him? Lucia looked down. I don't even know anymore. The next evening, Mark showed up at the agency. He looked tired. Lucia locked the door behind him. Mark whispered, Matteo came to see you. Lucia nodded. Yes. Mark closed his eyes. I'm sorry. Lucia folded her arms. Why is he after you? Mark sat on the edge of her desk. He said softly, I refuse to marry his business partner's daughter. Lucia frowned. That's it? Mark looked up at her. And I discovered they were laundering money through our hotels. I tried to stop it, Lucia whispered. So Matteo wants you out of the way. Mark nodded. And anyone close to me. Lucia shook her head. You brought this here. To me. Mark stood. I never wanted to involve you. Lucia cut him off. But you did. They stared at each other. Mark whispered, I care about you, Lucia, more than I should. Lucia felt her heart twist. She whispered, Then why lie? Mark stepped closer. I didn't lie. I hid things because I was afraid. Lucia whispered back, Afraid of me? Mark shook his head. Afraid of losing you. Lucia closed her eyes. When she opened them, she said, We need a plan. Mark blinked. A plan? Lucia nodded. I'm not handing you over to your brother, but I'm not going down with you either. Mark gave a small smile. Fair enough. Lucia smirked. Let's make this business personal. They sat together late into the night, talking, planning. Lucia said, We invite Matteo. Make him think I'm on his side. Mark nodded. And then, Lucia smiled, then we set the trap.
The invitation was sent. Lucia wrote a simple message. Dinner tomorrow night, Hotel Aurelia. Let's talk business. She sent it to Matteo. No reply. The next evening, Lucia stood in front of the mirror. Carla zipped up her black dress. You really doing this? Carla asked. Lucia nodded. I have to. Carla whispered, Be careful. Lucia smiled faintly. Always. At the hotel, Matteo arrived first. He walked into the private dining room, alone, holding a glass of whiskey. Lucia stood by the window. Matteo, she greeted. He smirked. Lucia, you look stunning. She gave a polite smile. Shall we sit? They sat at a small round table, candlelight flickering between them. Matteo leaned back. So, you've changed your mind? Lucia took a sip of wine. I realized maybe I judged too fast. Matteo nodded slowly. A smart woman knows when to shift sides. Lucia met his eyes. I'm a businesswoman. I do what's best for me. Matteo chuckled. And for your little agency. Lucia smiled. You're offering a partnership. Matteo leaned in. I'm offering protection and a lot of money. Lucia raised an eyebrow. Enough to make me forget your brother. Matteo's eyes darkened. My brother is a dead man walking. Lucia's heart raced, but her face stayed calm. Mark entered the room quietly. Matteo turned, eyes narrowing. Well, look who decided to join us. Mark walked to Lucia's side. I wouldn't miss this for the world.
Lucia placed her hand on Mark's arm. I invited him. Mateo smirked, playing both sides now. Lucia shrugged, just business. Mateo stood. You know, Lucia, I respect you. I even like you. Lucia looked up. Good to know. Mateo leaned over the table. But if you cross me, you won't leave this room. Mark stepped forward. Enough. Mateo stared at him. Do you really think you can win this, little brother? Mark said quietly, No, but we can. Mateo's eyes narrowed. We? Lucia reached into her purse and placed a recorder on the table. Mateo froze. Lucia pressed play. His voice echoed in the room. My brother is a dead man walking. I'm offering protection and a lot of money. If you cross me, you won't leave this room. Mateo's face turned pale. Lucia smiled sweetly. Thank you for being so honest. Mateo glared at her. Do you think this will stop me? Mark crossed his arms. No, but the press outside will. Mateo turned to the door. Lucia said calmly, The investors, the police, they're all waiting, and they heard everything. Mateo's jaw clenched. Lucia stood. Checkmate. Silence. Then Mateo laughed softly. Well played, Lucia. He picked up his whiskey. To the smartest woman in Rome. Lucia tilted her head. And the dumbest brother in Italy. Mark smirked. Mateo walked toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back. This isn't over. Lucia met his eyes. It is for me. Mateo walked out. Lucia exhaled slowly. Mark touched her shoulder. You did it. Lucia looked at him. We did it. Mark whispered, Thank you. Lucia pulled away gently. Don't thank me yet. Mark frowned. Why? Lucia whispered, Because this changes nothing between us.
The next morning, headlines filled every newsstand in Rome. DeSanti family scandal. Brother betrayed by his own blood. Business empire shaken by secret recording. Lucia Romano, the woman who outsmarted the DeSantis. Lucia stared at the newspapers on Carla's desk. Carla whistled. You're famous. Lucia shook her head. I didn't want this. Carla grinned. But you earned it. Lucia sighed. Now I just want it to be over. An hour later, Mark showed up at the agency. He walked in slowly, holding a newspaper in his hand. Lucia crossed her arms. Come to say thank you? Mark nodded. I came to say, I'm sorry. Lucia leaned against her desk. For what this time? Mark met her eyes. For everything. The lies, the risks, dragging you into my mess. Lucia shrugged. You didn't drag me. I walked in. Mark smiled sadly. Still, you saved me. Lucia whispered. Don't make me your hero, Mark. He stepped closer. You are. Lucia shook her head. You saved me first. You paid my debts. Mark froze. You know? Lucia nodded. I found out. The bank told me. Mark looked down. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to feel owned, Lucia finished. Mark looked up. Yes. Lucia's voice softened. Why? Mark whispered. Because I love you, and I didn't want to buy your love. Silence. Lucia stared at him. She whispered, You don't even know me. Mark stepped closer. I know you're strong. I know you're honest. I know you're the only real thing I've ever had. Lucia bit her lip. And I know I can't trust you. Mark's face fell. I don't blame you. Lucia turned away. Mark whispered, I'll leave. Lucia closed her eyes. Mark added softly,
I'll leave Rome, and I won't come back, unless you ask me to." He walked to the door. Lucia turned. "Mark!" He stopped. Lucia whispered, "Why did you really come to Rome?" Mark faced her. "I wanted to disappear." Lucia stared at him. "And now?" Mark smiled faintly. "Now, I want to start over." He left. Lucia watched him go. Carla walked in behind her. "You're letting him go?" Lucia whispered. "I don't know." That afternoon, Matteo held a press conference. Lucia watched it on TV at the agency. Matteo smiled for the cameras. "My brother has betrayed this family, but justice will be served. I promise you, the De Santi name will rise again." Lucia rolled her eyes. Carla crossed her arms. "He looks scared." Lucia smirked. "He should be." Later that night, Lucia received a call. A reporter. "Ms. Romano, do you want to make a statement?" Lucia said softly, "No, I'm done talking." She hung up. That same night, Mark sent her a message. "Leaving tomorrow. Thank you for everything." No heart, no hope, just a goodbye. Lucia stared at the screen. Carla asked, "So this is it?" Lucia whispered, "Maybe." Carla gave her a look. "Or maybe it's not." Lucia didn't answer, but deep inside, she wasn't sure either.
The airport was quiet. Lucia stood near the glass window, watching the planes take off. Carla stood beside her. "You're sure you want to do this?" Carla asked. Lucia nodded slowly. "I don't know, but I have to see him." Carla smiled softly. "Then go." Mark sat alone in the waiting area, a small suitcase at his feet. He stared at his ticket, but didn't really see it. Lucia walked up behind him. "Running away again?" she asked. Mark turned, surprised. "Lucia!" She sat beside him. "Thought I'd say goodbye in person." Mark gave a sad smile. "I didn't think you'd come." Lucia shrugged. "Neither did I." They sat in silence for a moment. Mark whispered, "I'm sorry." Lucia looked at him. "You've said that before." Mark met his eyes, "And I meant it every time." Lucia sighed. "You paid my debts. You saved my agency. Why?" Mark leaned forward. "Because I care, and because I was too much of a coward to tell you how I feel." Lucia tilted her head. "Do you really?" Mark nodded. "Yes." Lucia asked, "Even if I walk away right now?" Mark whispered, "Even then." A soft voice came over the speakers. "Final boarding call for Flight 327 to New York!" Mark stood up. Lucia stood too. Mark whispered, "I should go." Lucia nodded. "You should." Mark grabbed his suitcase. He looked at her one last time. "Goodbye, Lucia." Lucia felt her heart ache. She whispered, "Goodbye, Mark." He turned and started walking away. Lucia was frozen. Step by step, he moved toward the gate. Then she called out, "Mark!" He stopped, but didn't turn. Lucia whispered, "Don't go!" Mark turned around, eyes wide. "What?" Lucia walked toward him. "You said you wanted to start over." Mark nodded slowly. "Yes," Lucia whispered. "Then let's start over. Together." Mark dropped his suitcase. He whispered, "Are you sure?" Lucia smiled. "I've never been more sure." Mark stepped closer. "What about Rome? Your agency, your life here?" Lucia took his hand. "We'll figure it out. Somewhere new. Somewhere far from this mess." Mark chuckled. "Like where?" Lucia whispered, "The Caribbean sounds nice." Mark chuckled. "You're serious?" Lucia nodded. "Completely." Mark whispered,
Us. Just us. Lucia smiled. No secrets, no games. Mark took his face in his hands. I promise. Lucia whispered, me too. They kissed. Soft. Real. No lies. As they walked away from the gate, Mark asked, Caribbean, huh? Lucia grinned. White sands, blue water, no Mateo. Mark laughed. Sounds perfect. Lucia squeezed his hand. It will be. 1 week later, Lucia sat on the deck of a small boat, her hair blowing in the soft Caribbean breeze. Mark sat beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her. Morning, partner. Lucia smiled. Morning, runaway. Mark chuckled. Guess we both ran away. Lucia took a sip. Or maybe we ran towards something better. Mark leaned back. Hard to believe we're here. Lucia nodded. A month ago, I was drowning in debts. Mark smirked. And I was drowning in family drama. Lucia gave him a look. And lies. Mark raised his hands. Fair enough. They both laughed softly. Later that morning, they walked through a small local market. Vendors smiled at them. Tourists passed by without a second look. Lucia whispered, No one knows us here. Mark grinned. Feels good, doesn't it? Lucia nodded. Feels free. Mark stopped walking. He looked at her seriously. Lucia, I meant every word I said. She tilted her head. Which one? You said a lot. Mark smiled softly. I love you. Lucia stared at him for a moment, then whispered, I love you, too. They stood in the middle of the market, just smiling at each other. For once, there was no rush, no secrets, no danger. That afternoon, they sat on the beach. Lucia watched the waves. Mark said quietly, What happens now? Lucia leaned against him. We live. Mark chuckled. That's simple? Lucia nodded. That's simple. Mark hesitated. There's something I want to give you. Lucia frowned. What? Mark pulled out a small envelope from his pocket. He handed it to her. Lucia opened it. Inside, a document. The ownership papers of a small tourist agency in the Caribbean. Lucia stared at it. You bought this? Mark nodded. For us. For you. Lucia blinked. Why? Mark whispered. I believe in you, and because I know, this time, I want to build something honest. Lucia felt her eyes sting. She whispered, Thank you. Mark smiled. No, thank you for saving me. Lucia took his hand, and for the first time, she felt like this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. That night as they walked along the beach, Lucia said softly, I never thought I'd trust you again. Mark whispered, I didn't think I'd deserve a second chance. Lucia stopped walking. She looked at him. You proved me wrong. Mark smiled gently. You proved me right. They kissed again, under a sky full of stars. It was late at night. Lucia sat on the porch of their small beach house, listening to the waves. Mark walked out with 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to her. Couldn't sleep? Lucia shook her head. Too quiet. Mark sat beside her. I thought that's what we wanted. Lucia smiled softly. It is. Just feels strange after everything. Mark nodded. I know what you mean. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Mark said quietly, There's something I didn't tell you. Lucia turned to him. What now? Mark took a deep breath. Mateo, he's gone. But not forever. Lucia frowned. You mean? Mark nodded. He's out of the business, but he's still dangerous. Lucia leaned back. And we're safe? Mark met her eyes. As long as we stay here and stay quiet. Lucia whispered, Are you ready for that? Mark smiled faintly. I am, if you are. Lucia thought for a moment, then whispered, We came here to disappear. Mark nodded. And we did. Lucia looked at the ocean. Then let's stay disappeared. Mark grinned. Deal. The next morning, they opened the agency together. A small tour office by the beach. Lucia welcomed a couple into the shop. Mark carried brochures. Carla's voice came from the phone. She had decided to join them, moving from Rome. Lucia smiled. A new life, a new start. One afternoon, as they closed the agency, Lucia turned to Mark. You ever think about going back? Mark shook his head. No. You? Lucia smiled. Not even for a second. Mark leaned against the door. You know, I still can't believe you forgave me. Lucia smirked. I didn't. I just decided to trust you again. Mark chuckled. Fair enough. That night, they walked along the shore. Lucia whispered, We beat him. Mark smiled. No, you beat him. I just followed your lead. Lucia stopped. Mark. He looked at her. Yeah. Lucia smiled gently. We saved each other. Mark nodded slowly. Yes, we did. They kissed under the stars, and this time there was no past chasing them, no fear, no lies, just two people choosing each other.
Some stories don't end with a kiss, but with a choice. Lucia and Mark walked away from everything. The lies, the power games, the betrayals. They chose freedom and each other. Sometimes the strongest move is walking away. If you felt every twist of this story, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments. Would you have trusted Mark or walked away for good? And tell us, where in the world are you watching from?